Welcome, everybody, to Sports Doc Talk. I'm Will Sanchez, along with Dr. Grant Garcia, our orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine specialist. Really hyped to see you today. How are you? You got the Fly logo behind you, so you must be really excited about today's show.
Super excited. I mean, this is baseball. Baseball season started, and now I got my logo. ChatGPT did a great job. I hit in a bunch of Driveline, which we'll get into in a minute. This is what it shows up with. So it thinks that this is the future of baseball right here. So this is awesome.
We're really excited about the guests that we have today. But before we get to them, let's talk about our friends at the Recovery Shop. Dr. Garcia, I know you utilize them a lot. Your doctor friends and everyone else in the industry utilize them. But let everyone else know how important the Recovery Shop is.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, big thanks to our sponsors, but this is a day in and day out. They deliver for our patients. The patients are pleased. They get products that they can't normally get. And it doesn't matter if you get your surgery done in the state of Washington, you go from Idaho, people who fly in for surgery with me, they're able to still get access to these high level products. And really any surgeon that want to give their patients the sort of next level of recovery, they have it there. They have nutrition, they have certain machine options, they can adapt whatever you need. And whatever your sort of patient population is, they can adapt to it. So reach out to Mike B if you're a surgeon. If you're a patient, reach out to them too and say, hey, my surgeon's doing this. I'd be interested in having those products because it's a pretty easy setup. So anyhow, thanks, guys.
Yeah, and let's before we get to our guests, we wanted to share with everyone just our teaser for the show. Let's get right to it. Let's do it. And if I could get this to work over here, maybe we can. So let's get going here. Be nice, people. Come on now. Here we go. Okay, we're cooking with gas. Let's go.
Baseball's #1 training system has gotten even better. Our athletes have done some cool stuff over the years.
With the first pick, the Cleveland Guardians select Travis Bazzana.
And some would be satisfied with results like ours, but not us. Introducing Training 2.0 from Driveline. Training 2.0 is the most advanced player development system baseball has ever seen. And it's not close. Of course, it starts with the things we made famous. But it's become so much more than that. Training 2.0 gives athletes a clear plan to achieve their goals in a way that has never been possible before. It starts with an assessment to understand exactly where you stand. From there, that precise picture allows you to execute personalized training that builds on your strengths and attacks your weaknesses head on. Improve your command or your contact and become more durable by knowing how hard to train or how hard not to every single day. With Training 2.0, you can also train from anywhere in the world with the only app built to give you your very own sports science team right there in your pocket. So when the last day of your baseball career arrives, you're going to have to be honest with yourself. Did you do everything you could? Or did you settle for something less? Training 2.0, available only at Driveline.
I'm hyped. Let's bring him on. Let's get Dylan Newcomer on the show. Dylan, welcome to the show. Physical therapist at Driveline Baseball. First and foremost, thank you for taking some time to join us today. We're really excited to have you and to talk baseball, to talk physical therapy, to talk it all. Once again, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Very looking forward to a good conversation here.
And I think before we, when we introduce him, to understand, guys, this is different than we've had a lot of athletic trainers, we've had a lot of physical therapists, but this is a different animal. What Dylan does is extremely niche, right? Baseball players, baseball. That's what he does, and he lives it, breathes it. He works closely with Driveline. He can talk about his relationship with Driveline, but this is a group that's what they do, right? You're a baseball player. You drive to Kent to have Driveline take care of you. And you will, there are many players I take care of. They will spend the extra amount of time, effort, money, whatever you say, to go there, to have this type of facility and to have these type of people like Dylan to do this. And Dylan's really one of the key foundations of this. So anyhow, Dylan, tell us a little bit about yourself so the audience can learn more about this? Because I'm sure if you've never played baseball before, you're like, what the heck is Driveline? That video was sick, but I have no idea. I've never heard about this, but this sounds so cool.
Yeah, I mean, Driveline is well before my time is whenever it started. I think back in 2012, and you saw a quick clip in that video of some of the early days of what made Driveline famous. But it really started out as just a training company down in Puyallup that made athletes better than they were when they walked in the door. They were very velocity driven. They've lived in controversy their whole life. You either love them or you hate them. But there's no doubting that they have influenced the game to a substantial degree. You probably can't go into a major league clubhouse without seeing one of Driveline's weighted balls somewhere in there, or at least one athlete wearing a pulse sensor or things like that. So it's a very influential company, and I got the privilege to become a part of it in 2022. But before that, I was a Mizzou physical therapy student back in Columbia, Missouri. And I actually was a strength and conditioning coach. That was my background back in the day. And I was doing that with a Driveline pitching certification. So I was kind of doing a dual role back there. I was being a strength coach and throwing coach, and helping athletes figure out how to navigate that world from a performance side. But whenever everything wrapped up with PT school, I came out to Seattle because I had to just be part of the company that has been such an influential part of my baseball career, my professional career. So took that over in 2022, and I've been here ever since.
And Dylan, so tell us about how you guys like integrate, right? Because then obviously you work with Driveline, you do the players, and it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship, at least from my understanding. Describe it to you, kind of like, how does that work with you? Because obviously you have this extremely premier facility organization that's, and we'll go into it, but it's not just now in Seattle anymore or in Kent. It's expanded. So
yeah. So my relationship with Driveline is I am the medical provider, and Driveline's not a medical company, so they can't outright hire a PT. And so I own my own clinic. I run my own clinic, and we have this nice symbiotic relationship where I take care of their athletes. I get to see some of my own private athletes outside of here. I get to enjoy the odd ACL or low back pain or something like that. But 99% of my time is going to be spent on those baseball athletes and taking care of the athletes inside Driveline. And it's also expanded, like you mentioned. So they've opened up to Arizona. So they're in Scottsdale. And they just opened a Tampa, Florida facility. I think it was in October of this past year. And so my goal over the next year or so is to expand down there as well and get a PT stationed at each gym. And yeah, we're just going to be taking care of all the pro athletes, the college athletes, youth, whatever comes through the doors. Make sure that everybody's in a good, healthy spot, and trying to put rehab initiatives in a really trying to push them through at a really high level.
Dylan, when was the first time that you heard about Driveline? For me, I know that Driveline has been around for a while, but for me, the superstar, especially at the time, that was talking about Driveline was it Trevor Bauer, right?
Yeah, Trevor Bauer. Yep.
And he was like a proponent, and I know his dad is an engineer, was talking about mechanics and all these other things. And it seems like Driveline and that relationship at the time really was a perfect cohesion, a perfect marriage. And really, that, like I said, as someone that worked with Major League Baseball, I used to work with the New York Mets, and being in that kind of that world, when he started talking about it, that's when I was like, who's Driveline Baseball? What's going on? And all the incredible things that was happening back then. I guess that's what, 2018, maybe roughly, when Bauer was kind of talking about this. So what was your experience, or when was the first time that you heard about Driveline Baseball that really kind of, pulled you or gravitated to working with them?
Yeah. So my first exposure wasn't actually Trevor Bauer, but it quickly became on my radar. We had a student athlete at Mizzou that came up here to train one summer, and he came back and was like, here's a plyo ball. This is what we do. This is the Driveline program. He introduced it to the pitching coach at Mizzou and the director of physical therapy for the Mizzou healthcare system. Yeah. And because of that relationship with the director of PT I had as a strength coach kind of in the healthcare system, he was like, we got to get this here. So it was pretty much just like, hey, you got to learn what Driveline is right now. You got to start teaching it because this is going to be kind of the evolution of the game. And so that was kind of my first exposure to it. And then ever since then, it's just been kind of living and breathing it.
Got you. Dr. Garcia, you're back. We lost you for a second, but
I don't know what's going on with my internet connection, but hopefully I'll survive for the whole podcast. So anyhow, can you tell so this is awesome. I mean, I think what we understand is like as orthopedic surgeons, right? Like I see these players, even if you're team position when you're in the dugout or you're in back thing, you're seeing the players when they get injured, but really that like gap between injury and the game, we're not really seeing what's going on behind the scenes. And working now with Dylan pretty closely, you know, there's a lot more that goes into us. And we know this is like, it's not really the best kept secret because a lot of the baseball players know about it, but like this is really what people do behind the scenes. Or say, how do you get better? Can you describe to the audience, first off, obviously we will go into all the things you guys do, but really why is baseball so much different, right? Like there are other companies that do different things for other sports, but nothing at this level really. There's just not as much technology used. We always talk about all the cool things in football and cool things in, you know, basketball, but there's nothing to the level of precision and sort of mechanics that we care more about in baseball because it's such a complex and also for valuable situation, right? Like you have very few places where the pitcher is so much a part of the baseball thing or the swing. So maybe you describe that a little bit more, like what makes baseball so unique and why baseball?
You know, I think there's a couple different things we could go there. It's definitely one of the most quantifiable sports. And I think that's kind of the obsession of Driveline is like, if we can quantify it, we can train it. And if we can train it, we can make the player more valuable. So I think that has a lot of, interest for especially high level players, but even at just the basic level, it's just been a passion project for everybody here. It's just the sport that we all love. Yeah. But yeah, baseball is just that very scientifically driven, easily quantifiable, and the technology is getting better every year. So we just keep trying to find ways to push the industry forward to figure out, A, how do we make players better at their sport, but B, how do we also keep them safer while we're also making these gains at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's also interesting that, you know, one thing is like a lot of the other sports that people do, no one asks me, they're like, hey, I'll just go to the best one in the area, right? Best PT in the area or best ATC in the area. They're like, I'm fine with just give me the local number. But the baseball players, when they come in to see me, they're like, give me the best one in the state. Give me the best one that's within 2 or 3 hours. Like we'll drive, but I want like the baseball team, right? Like I don't want anybody that doesn't know what I'm doing. Like my son's a pitcher. He's going to play college. Like I need someone that does that. And so that's what's I think is really cool about having Driveline, but it's also unique about the players, right? I mean, you could probably have a lot of people that come in like they already know about you. They're so honed in and they're so motivated. Like that is probably a nice piece of for you guys is that you're already getting people that are motivated to do it, right? They're not coming in, they're like, hey, I don't really know what I need. I just kind of want to go back to running, right? These are people that really care about going to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, Driveline is definitely a financial investment, and it's definitely the facility that you go to if you have. It doesn't matter what your desires are, but if you're committed, if baseball is something that you absolutely want to get better at, and you know maybe you don't have aspirations of going to pro or whatever it may be, but you want to play at high level in your college, or you maybe want to get to indie ball. Like it is the place that like if you are going to invest in yourself, there's no other place to really go. And so, especially with the rehab side, yeah, we get guys that come in a couple hours away, will drive here. And I think it's just because baseball is so very niche when it comes to rehab. It's never something that you really discuss in PT school. You don't get trained on how to rehab a baseball player specifically. And maybe you'll discuss about a return to throw program, but more often than not, it's everything you learn is post grad. And so if you're going to find somebody that's a really good baseball rehab provider, it's somebody who kind of lives and breathes that sport. They have to really go after it after graduation. It's not something that we're all trained up on.
It's interesting, Will, you hear this. It's kind of the same way as we talk about this with the surgeries, right? Like, and Dylan knows this, right? There's only certain people that you want doing your Tommy John thing, right? It's just not that many numbers out there, right? Like of all the surgeries we do, the UCL is just so much less common. And then even in training, you know, unless you train with you need to train with someone that does a lot of the MLB, you know, college level athletes, but it's just not a common thing that you see unless you sort of with the people that are doing the most. You know, Romeo, you have Elatrosh, you have David Olchek, you know, you name it, the list can go on, but you got to see high volumes, and those may seem like normal volumes until you get out in the real world and realize that that's just an anomaly, right? This is just the select few. It's the same way with the physical therapy. So it all links together. And, you know, I think Will's heard this ad nauseum, but can you, you brought that slide back up again about Driveline. Can you talk, Dylan, a little bit about the old versus the new principles? Because I think I don't know enough about this stuff. It's just really interesting to me. Like, I understand some of it from hearing from the players and from you, but can you talk about this sort of past and the future? And we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah. You know, Driveline is principle driven. And what I mean by that is we go back to the basics of sports science and what that means to like actually train an athlete. There are going to be methods and fads that come along. You know, this is the thing that gets you your next 5 miles per hour type trick that takes the trend for 6 months to a year. We're never going to be that company. We're always going to rely on our base principles of how, we stress an athlete, we allow them to recover and adapt and just go down to the foundation of that. But in the past, Driveline was trying to solve the problem of like, how do we make pitchers throw harder? How do we make them, a more valuable asset? And that's really where the first decade of the company lived is velocity driven. And you saw this quick for a brief moment in that video that we played up front. Now we're looking at how do we train command. And if you recall in the video, there was a little board with like a projected catcher's mitt, and you saw where the ball popped up on the screen. So we're trying to measure command. We have an intended zone tracker is what we call it. So we're putting up, where do we want the ball to go? Where does it actually land? Can we measure that miss distance? And then can we figure out if we can identify training strategies that makes that miss distance tighter? We get better at the command. And so that's kind of our new goal now is we understand velocity, but we don't understand command as the large. And now we can start taking that data and comparing it to motion capture, strength, power, all of that stuff, and seeing what metrics actually matter when it comes to making that skill more impactful.
And so, Dylan, you're talking about command. There's a numerical value you guys are learning to put on command. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. You guys are trying to quantify it like you keep quantifying everything else because that's the way to get better, right? You're just like, oh, your command was better. It seemed better. That doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of just the old IDAR is kind of what we used to say for velocity. Now instead of eyeballing the command, we're actually measuring specifically how many inches are you missing on each pitch profile. What's the average miss distance that you have? And then we can start to quantify, do your mechanical changes from the motion capture lab over a 6-week or 12-week retest cycle, do those correlate with better command? Or does your strength values and your rotator cuff or your forearm or overall as an athlete, do those correlate with better command on average? So yeah, we're trying to quantify everything that we can about it.
Dylan, how are you utilizing, we always talk about future tech on the show, but how are you utilizing now with AI, implementing that in some of, the new technology for, Driveline, and whether it's the analysis of player A and the development from day 0 to day 60, and, seeing those mechanics, obviously seeing whether it's the speed, the command, the strength. What are some of those conversations, and just try to expand on that conversation?
So I'll give a quick example of one of the most recent use cases we've had. I mean, it's really infiltrated every part of Driveline as an organization, where it's making all of our, calculating processes go faster. It helps us spitball ideas faster. We have a whole staff of, excellent coders with the founder of the company being a master coder himself. So it's really just streamlining those processes. But, one good example is we recently came out with a feature in our Driveline app that is using computer vision to be able to do the same thing that force plates do in terms of measuring your power whenever you're doing jumps. So we put a sticker on you, we let the camera track you, and then we used AI to learn how to do all of this. that it basically built out our entire code, and then we validated it. So we can just take a video of you at 60 frames per second, and we can get the same data that we're getting from our volved force plates. So what that means is that whenever athletes aren't in gym, we can still measure their progress, and especially in the weight room, and then over time, we're using it to solve all the issues that we have had in terms of, if we have a question, where do we go? We check ChatGPT first and see what kind of answers we can get from it, and then we go from there. So it's really just a stimulator, if you will. It just helps us make that next step faster.
That's awesome. And do you use any? Do you think that's kind of help you guys with your kind of future projects too? I mean, like you said, you're using this football. Like, we want to measure this. How do we do this? And you're using ChatGPT, but now are you using it for like, hey, what's the future? Or is that kind of, how do you guys determine that? I mean, how are you going? What dictates what's next for you guys?
That's a good question. It's always whatever nobody is thinking of, I think, is probably what's next for us. That's kind of what Bodie always, Kyle Bodie, the founder, he's always kind of pushing forward, is that like we are looking to solve the problem that nobody is kind of thinking of just yet. And that's kind of where the command one's really, really recent, within the last year that we've developed it. So we'll see kind of where that takes us. And then, what problems come up next. Maybe this whole torpedo bat thing is a really interesting issue to start solving.
We'll definitely get into that. One of the conversations that we've had with whether it's coaches or parents is what can little Johnny do or not do at certain ages. So with your involvement with professional, college, high school, amateur, what are the barometers there? What are some of the conversations, whether it's with the client or internally, when you have certain players, wanting to do certain exercises? How do you manage that? Saying, okay, if you're under 16, you shouldn't be throwing a curveball or breaking ball. Like, how do you determine that? Or
I think what Will's trying to say is, how do you age manage as like, who dictates what, right? Like, even when I do my surgeries, I have a dictation in there of what I want you guys to do, but you guys do a lot of it. I trust you guys to make decisions on your own as experts. So how does that work for you guys? Is that what you're asking, Will?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dylan. You got it already.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're always going to consider is the skeletal maturity of the athlete. And that's probably step one, is like, we got to make sure that we're not putting them in any, extremely harmful positions based off of that specific factor. And so that 15 to 16-year-old group is definitely kind of that transitional age. And beyond the skeletal maturity, we're also looking at, how quickly have these athletes grown in the last year? Because that's always kind of an injury spike area, is, those rapid growth spurts. And when we get younger, we're also just looking at how do we look at a long-term athletic development model? And some of the things that we do with our young kids is going to be more of the gymnastics and calisthenics based stuff, like learn how to manage your body. We're not necessarily trying to have you do a velo program at 12 years old, because nobody cares about how hard you're throwing then. But what we do care about is that you're developing your natural athleticism, and that you're stacking kind of year after year of consistent training and consistent throwing, so that way you develop into where we want you to be. Puberty is another big one, right? You can have that 17-year-old who still looks like he's 12, and that 17-year-old who looks like he's 25. So we're always kind of taking that into consideration as well. And then, like our early bloomers, we always have to make sure that we aren't, exploiting to an extent. We want to make sure that they have a solid training plan, a solid foundation underneath them, and that we're not doing the showcase thing where just because you throw hard, we need to take you to every single showcase and try to make you, throw 95 every weekend.
When you have someone on the bubble like that, do you have internal conversations saying, I know he's this age, but he's hit puberty, he's big, strong, things like that. We think he's ready for the next step. What's the process for you guys at Driveline when it comes to something like that?
Yeah, if we have one of those early bloomers, it really does become this more collaborative approach of like getting the parents involved, getting the coaches involved, setting out this, especially when we know this kid has college potential or potentially even beyond. It's what do we need to do over the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to make sure that we're we're capitalizing on what you can already do, but B, safeguarding against, excessive use or anything like that. So we go back to the training foundations and our principles. It's that we need to physically develop you first. We need to make sure that you can handle the stressors of the game. We need to make sure that we are monitoring and managing your workload of throwing. And then we're also having those conversations of, what are you doing outside of here? Because athletes that we're talking about right now are a part of our academy program. So they're here 3-4 days a week, training.
Can you explain that?
All those
Can you
things.
explain that academy program thing?
Yeah, so the academy is basically, if you would imagine your typical like 9U, 10U, 12U, 15U type teams that you would see for like travel ball, except we're taking it and kind of flipping it on its head, where instead of it being a travel ball team where they just go play, we're looking at it from a developmental perspective where it's train in terms of develop yourself as a physical specimen and make sure that you're getting in the weight room and doing all the things from an arm care perspective, that you're getting on a managed throwing program that's consistently being applied throughout the year, and we're monitoring your workload. And then once we have those foundations, we go out and play. Doesn't mean that we have the best players in the world, but we're looking at it from a developmental standpoint of how do we take any player that comes to us and make them a better version of where they were when they walked in the door.
Well, and I wonder if that's probably what you guys feel, but to me, if my son or whatever, my daughter is trying to play baseball and I hear this, to me, I think about it as like injury prevention first, show off second, right? Like, which is opposite of the way I think a lot of people think, right? They're like, hey, let's get my kid in front of the scouts as soon as possible. But to have a group like yours that's so focused on injury prevention, rehab, perfecting technique, Will, we know this from like, they don't get any breaks, right? Or the coach is like, throw harder, no rest for you, versus the like rest, train, strengthen, then throw. I mean, you probably see all the time, but do you have a lot of experience where, someone, I know these people that like kind of give up on who they're working with and they're like, I need somebody else. And then I'm sending the Driveline and then they kind of get all fixed, right? It's just like going to the doctor, but it's a doctor of physical therapy, right? They all messed up. They have mechanics off. They've been told just to throw as hard as they can and they're terribly sloppy. And now they come to you guys and it's like, let's start all over again. Let's break this down, right? And so is that what you guys get too? That's must be the feeling some of these parents get, I think.
Yeah, I would say that happens a little bit less frequently because we've had the kids that are in our academy program have typically been around for a while. And so it's been running for a couple years, and we definitely do get new athletes every year, but it's more of that we've had you since you were young and we've helped you develop over a long period of time. And that's kind of been our goal there. And so occasionally we'll get those stories of like, hey, I've always had pain. All right, we have to go back to square one. Why are you having pain? It's because of X, Y, and Z. So we need to address X, Y, and Z before we even care about getting you back into a throwing program or anything like that. So occasionally we do have to hit the reset button. But I would say for the most part, our athletes are kind of in that consistent year-round plan of how do we keep you healthy and developed and ebb and flow the season of play.
And then I think this one's always a big one. Will ask me, but how do you guys deal with the parents? Mm-hmm. So in my office, I told Will that I'm known for when the docs in my office get a baseball player and there's like two or three or four parents, who knows how many parents that could be in the room, and they're all hovering over the player because they want to know he's gonna get hurt, right? And I'm the doc. They're like, this is Garcia. He'll take care of this one. I got to go in there and try to address multiple people that are either frustrated or upset because they've had different opinions. And a lot of the parents, I'm not going to name names, but a lot of the parents in general like to dictate the care. So how do you guys deal with that? Because you're seeing them more than I am. I see them for one short visit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, the nice thing is that when they join the academy, the parents sign a contract that we are the experts basically, and like we are absolutely going to involve them in that process, but we are never going to put the player at risk. So if we say that, hey, your son has had pain for throwing, these are the things that we need to do, all of the coaches are on board and going to back us up on those decisions, and this is going to be the best thing for your athlete. And we're happy to sit down with the parent and walk them through every decision that we make. Luckily though, I think they realize innately that like this is probably what's best for the kid. And we really haven't had much issue with any parents in terms of, backlash or anything like that, or a frustration with the plan of care or anything. Generally, if the kid needs to shut down from throwing or anything like that, we're all on board. We're all on the same page, and we're happy to explain our reasoning. And I think that's really the key there is if I have to take an hour and talk to a parent, I have the luxury to do so. So we'll do it.
I think that's key because, I mean, Will go into this. He knows he's got kids, but like, it's frustrating if someone doesn't have time for you, you are like even more frustrated, right? Like, and with you guys, they're paying a premium to be with a high level place like yours. So for you to be able to give them time, it's great. And that's also something that a lot of the parents need, right? These parents are like, give me the best. I don't care what it is. I want the best person. I want the person who's going to take care of me. And that's why it's nice for me as a physician who takes care of a lot of baseball players to send them to you guys, knowing that, that they're going to get all that they need, right? There's not, like you said, the fact you guys are you're able to say that topic. And I know Will's heard me say this ad nauseum. The fact you're able to say that most parents are very pleased with our care and they don't involve themselves very well shows you guys have established yourselves as a very strong program, because that's a hard thing to be able to do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Quick question here. You hear different people say different things when it comes to playing one sport all year round or playing multiple sports. Has your data shown any numbers when it comes to someone that, let's say, will pitch, most of the year, or you have a pitcher then plays football or track and then comes back to pitching? So do you have any numbers to reflect that? Because that's always a conversation within parents, whether, someone plays one sport all year, or is it to have a more well-rounded athlete play multiple sports? And maybe we're just talking more than just pitching, but also body development and utilizing other parts of their body.
Yeah, I don't have any data that would specifically give you an answer, but I can speak to it anecdotally. Sure. Probably the most consistent thing that we see is athletes that maybe do play multiple sports throughout the year. They potentially almost get more overuse injuries in a sense. Those are the athletes that we have to more carefully monitor, that don't necessarily get to participate at the same level as everybody else. If we kind of classify our throwing days by either it's a low intent throwing day, it's just, take it easy, catch play. Maybe it's a higher intent throwing day where we're purposely trying to, stress the body a little bit. Those are the athletes where it's like, okay, you're in the middle of wrestling season. You're already getting beat up. We probably just don't need to be doing a high intent throwing day. And in the past, before, a couple of years ago, when we were just starting this program out and we were seeing how things would work out, those are the kind of kids that would be like, oh, he had a high intent throwing day, and he also had 2 wrestling matches, this past weekend. He's beat up now he's down for 2 weeks. We need to let him chill out. So it's always that's kind of the perspective that we get, is how do we manage the in-season athlete who also wants to continue to train baseball? So that's kind of the challenging part. The athletes that are throwing year round, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that you can't be throwing 100% all year. So our throwing program is going to have intentionally no throw periods, intentional ramp up periods, and things like that, where we are managing the workload. So that way we give them time to recover. We get them ready for whenever it's time to play, but it's never just like go, 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 where the athlete is, going to get burnt out throughout the year.
Great. And then I don't want to sidetrack you, but we're time. We see the clock ticking down, and we want to make sure we get all the good questions answered from Dylan. Can you talk a little bit about your experience kind of with the pro level difference versus recreation? I know we have a slide on that if you want to pull it up, Will. Yeah. But I think that's important for everybody to hear, right? Because it's just a difference. And obviously there's also bigger risk for you guys, right? You want to make sure you get these players back. And for Driveline, these players are flying in, or they're there for the summer, they're there for the off season to rehab with you guys until they go back to their team.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, working with the pros is sometimes easier than working with the kids. The pros have all the time in the world to dedicate to it because it's their job, it's their livelihood. So they have that luxury of being able to spend 3 hours here and do everything that they need to do. Whereas sometimes with the kids, they've got school, they've got other commitments, they've got orchestra or something like that, where they have 45 minutes to see me once or twice a week versus come in 6 days a week with the pro and check box every little thing that we need. But a lot of times whenever you are working with a professional athlete, especially an older professional athlete, it's probably a little bit more of the case that I see for the longer term rehabs. It's like that 28 to 30-year-old who's trying to make his comeback. You're more so managing the mileage that he's accrued. The training doesn't necessarily change too much from like a younger pro and older pro to a degree, but it's more so the secondary considerations you have to take. So managing that mileage of the past injuries or anything like that, they don't recover.
Will, doesn't that make you feel good that there's old pros at 28?
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's the way we got to hear this.
All right, Dylan, thanks for coming. We'll see you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
So let's kind of keep going with this. So do you guys have a different, I know you guys follow like the protocols, but like I said before, like when I have a patient going to Driveline, I have my Tommy John surgeries. I'm kind of like, here's my protocol, but you guys are the experts, right? I can only do so many Tommy John surgeries. You guys see them from all around the area. So are there rehab differences for you, or things you look differently for from a surgical recovery versus a non-surgical recovery? And if so, kind of what are you looking at when you do those things? Like, a player gets injured, he hasn't had surgery, but it's like, let's see how he does. Partial injury. What do you guys do by that? How does that work for you?
So this is my personal viewpoint, and this is kind of highlighting a thread that I did that got some good traction over this past couple of weeks. But when it comes to a partial injury, I see that almost as risky or as demanding as a surgical injury, right? In a surgery, we're talking about a longer time frame because, especially in the reconstruction, you've done bone drilling and all of that stuff. You have to let everything heal. In a partial tear non-op, I think you almost have to take nearly the same amount of time. And that's coming from a perspective of like, we have destabilized that joint. That ligament is no longer as strong. So we need more time to build up all of the protective tissue around that elbow, not less. And sometimes I think the standard protocol of 6 to 8 weeks of rehab and then try to return to throw is just too short. We need to give potentially a couple more months. And this device that you see here in the image on the screen is it's called FlexPro Grip. It's a device that I'm very heavily involved with developing rehab protocols for and things like that. But it measures the specific finger strength of some of the key stabilizers for the UCL. This is an example of an athlete who's 10 months out of post-partial UCL tear, but didn't have surgery. So still had it, got the PRP injection. But he was, you can see on the far right, he was at 56 and 68 percentile of where I wanted him to be. And he was 20 miles below his goal, still throwing. He wants to be 95, still having pain at 75 type deal. So we can quantify like the specific strength of these tendons and start to identify a rehab plan. But the key here with this training protocol is it takes 12 plus weeks to see the stiffness gains that we want to see in the tendon. And that's really the name of the game here. Is we aren't just training strength of the tendon. It's a good proxy measure, but stiffness is the key quality we're looking at adapting. And that's what this whole device is built around, is enhancing the tendon stiffness to protect the UCL. And so it takes at least 12 weeks to see that gain. There's really good research on this done by Keith Barr and many of the other tendon researchers that strength will go up linearly. Month 1, month 2, month 3, strength will go up linearly. But tendon stiffness, which is the thing that directly offloads torque from the UCL, it takes about 10 to 12 weeks of consistency of really high intensity training, greater than 70% MVC, to see the actual stiffness changes. And FlexPro Grip is currently in validation studies as well to prove that this is exactly what's going on whenever we use the device.
I think this brings up two questions for me. One, what's interesting here is that, this kid in my office, 10 months post UCL, not back to where he wants to do, generally they'll usually throw in the towel by my office and get their UCL done. We'll redo a UCL repair with internal brace. So it's interesting to see this timeline, right? And this is exactly the point I bring up with the players when they come in, and you've had players that we bounce back and forth. We just talked about one recently where I've been like, hey, let's give you as much time as you need. But sometimes they just can't be patient, right? Like, it's nice that you got a player as patient as this that wanted to wait 10 months to try to do non-operative treatment, because there is a part of me that says, and I'm just interested what your opinion is, that, if they had surgery and a UCL repair for a partial at 10 months, 4 months of non-op, 6 months of surgery later, they might have been back already. So what is your thoughts on that portion? Again, it's it's player dependent. You're not making these decisions all the time. It's what the player wants.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting just to bring up. And also, have you seen this used for rehab for surgical patients?
Yeah. So for a little bit of context, this patient specifically, he only started with me last week. So he was actually in Florida, and unfortunately his rehab was rice bucket and dry needling, which just is going to miss the bucket, right? Like we're just completely missing everything about the rehab process that's necessary to get him past the partial tear. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is like, the time frame is often too short, but rehab often, especially, going to the non-specialized, is often too general. It doesn't hit the mark. And so in that kid's case, his hope was that he was going to be fine. He's been doing his return to throw, but he was a little over optimistic, I think, where he thinks that it'll just keep getting better. But I think it's just he's missed the mark.
That's the type of person you want to get him. But the other thing is, if he hasn't really had good rehab, I don't even know if that's 10 months, right? Like we keep saying, the number always starts, like even in surgery recovery, right? Like you can't just not recover and then start throwing fastballs a year later, right? It's all about when you start doing your rehab. It's why guys like Driveline and why guys like Dylan are so important. It's the same thing with your injury, right? Like if you do no work to get back from your injury, it's when we tell people it's a 3-month recovery, that's 3 months with work.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to highlight, that the work has to be the right kind of work too. It doesn't, like he's been working his ass off. It's just been on the wrong things, unfortunately. It hasn't gotten him to the point where he needs to be able to do the thing he wants to do. And I think that's really the key, is that, for him, he's probably day one. He's no different than a partial tear that just happened last week in terms of where he's currently at. So, he's got a couple months ahead of him training on this device and doing some of the other rehab protocols that we have for him to see if this works out for him. And then, we may get 3 months down the road and it's time to have that conversation of like, hey, it's been 13 months. We did the things that we thought were necessary. This may be beyond rehab considerations, but he hasn't had a fair chance at it, I think. So
I would agree with that. That's a really interesting point. And then that follow-up question again, like I told you, is are you guys doing this at all for any of your reconstructions or your repairs?
Yeah, so I've been heavily involved with building out rehab protocols with the device. And so we actually just start guys, we set a target. So the device has enough data from pro teams, college teams, all of this to say, if you throw 95 miles an hour, this is the rough strength targets that we want you to hit on this device. And so what I can say is, all right, I'm going to take you down to 5% of that. So you're 3 weeks out of TJ reconstruction. We're going to start you at 5%, and we're going to start loading there. And then week by week, we can incrementally increase the targets on the device. And it's all isometric training to build up the tendon. So over the course of that whole rehab protocol, we eventually build you up to the training threshold that we want you to be, which is 70%. And then the other things that this device does is trains rate of force development, trains endurance of it. So we have different protocols for different time frames in that rehab process. But basically from week 2, week 3 out of there, whenever we feel comfortable to start doing some light forearm work, we're starting percentages of where we want you to end up by the end of the rehab.
And are you doing this with the throwing stuff, or this is before throwing? This is pre-throwing.
This is typically pre-throwing
as well. Okay.
Yeah, it's pre-throwing and during throwing. So we're going to do all the things necessary to put you in a good spot pre-throwing. Our goal is to get you at least to 80 to 90% of our healthy, like I'm full 100% targets before you even start throwing. My goal is always to make you a monster of an athlete that could handle anything before you even pick up a ball. And then so that way, whenever you do start your return to throw program, it's the easiest thing you've ever done. I don't want throwing to be the next step in the progression. I want it to be a regression, honestly, where you just feel like it, this is great. I feel comfortable, and we can ride that through the entire return to throw progression.
As I promised Dylan beforehand, I knew this was going to happen, but like we get a topic and then we want to ask more questions because I love this.
Yep.
So I think one thing for the listeners should understand that when I always tell my players, right, that 3 month, I'm like, we start the return to throwing program, but I'm using 3 months arbitrarily from what we learn, what we do. And the idea that there is now a functional test, right? It's the same way we have an ACL, right? Functional sports test to go to the next level, quad strength to go to the next level.
Yeah.
What the listeners need to understand, you brought this up really well, but I wanted to summarize it one more time for listeners. But the flexor tendons are all the ones on the outside, and those are what protect the UCL. So if the flexors are weak, no matter how good a job my surgery is, you will injure it. And I will tell my players notoriously, and you probably can attest to this, that during their throwing process, maybe not anymore with this new device, that a player will call me and say, I tore my UCL again, or I feel like I feel something bad, like my arm's really sore after throwing. And 9.9 times out of 10, it's their flexor strain. Right? They get a flexor strain or something from overdoing it. And so this is, I think, why you're bringing this up and why it's so important, because like if they come in, like I'm sure those players that the last couple of years that have called about that were not totally ready to go, right? They did not have this where they're at 90%, because if you're at 90% and you're at a level of a full thrower, you're just not going to strain it the same way. It's just not as common, right? Anyway, Will, I can see Will's eyes going. He's curious. What question do you have, Will?
I've got 15 of them, but I'll keep it short and sweet. We're talking about the UCL, and it seems like there's been an uptick in UCL injuries, especially in Major League Baseball. Are those the discussions that you guys have internally, or is this something that you've noticed, or due to the way you guys train and the time and effort and making sure that you're doing the isometrics and strengthening the stabilizers that you personally and Driveline personally are seeing less? So what about those discussions when you see a Garrett Cole go down, when you see all these guys going down? We had, let me throw some numbers. I'll throw some numbers up there. This was 40 starting pitchers have thrown 100 plus pitches over 98 miles per hour since 2020. They've now had 63% of them have Tommy John surgery in their career. When you see numbers like that, what are those internal discussions?
I mean, it's multifactorial, right? It's this new device is great. It's probably started to really take hold in MLB in the last year. A lot of teams are getting on it. So hopefully as that continues to develop, maybe we start to see less and less. Gotcha. I think it's mostly been around the fact that our training and our rehab demands haven't been specific enough, right? We're like really good at building the engine, which is like, the strength and conditioning of the general athlete, but we haven't been as good as of building the armor at the same intensity. Kind of the old throwers 10 type model, like really easy, low load, high endurance rep schemes, all that stuff wasn't matching the demands of the game. So I think it's starting to see that shift. So that's one conversation that we've always had. And we've definitely seen a lot of great success with it internally. The other demand is workload monitoring. And what that looks like in the off season, what that looks like in the preseason, spring training. Like, are we actually getting guys fully ready for that workload demand, or are we seeing a massive spike going into spring training? Because if you spend your whole off season never getting prepared for, going back to back or anything like that as a relief pitcher, or going from a 25, 30 pitch bullpen up to 70 pitches, like those kind of workload spikes catch up to you. And you see it in spring training, guys go down real fast. And then it's workload monitoring in season. What does your in-season training look like? So that way you maintain those things that you built in the off season. So it's how do we do it on multiple different fronts? And I think every year we're getting better at it, but the game is still just so advanced that it's just bound to happen to a degree. There's a lot of chronic injuries that are under the radar that catch up to them.
Yeah, and also you lost some of the sticky stuff that was helping pitchers with the baseball, and I'm not sure if that has anything to do with numbers, right? I believe it was Tyler Glasnow was talking about it a few seasons ago, where he was like, I had to grip that ball so tight. I didn't have a little something to give me just a grip, not something crazy. And that's when he blew out his arm. So those are whole other interesting conversations that we could even get into, whether there should be something to help with certain grips because the baseball is so slick. But then I'm really taking this off on the whole other 93, and we can go into a whole other conversation. So
anyway. Will's notorious for trying to break us over the hour mark. That's just what he does, especially the last 15 minutes of the podcast. He's thinking about all the ways he can ask you 100 questions.
I got one more thing before you jump in. And listen, we're not going to worry about it. We owe him 5 more minutes. We go 5 minutes longer. I'll take care of it in editing. We're not worried about it. Listen, I had the privilege of meeting 2 amazing women at Driveline. I've been to the facility at Kent. I've interviewed Luisa Gauchi, 19 years old at the time. She worked with my daughter with baseball. Is she with the Brewers now, I think?
Yeah, she's with the Brewers. Yep.
An absolutely amazing person, a sweetheart. and just showing her passion that she has for the game and working with the kids. She was working with, I believe it was 13 and under at that time. And at the same time, I'm looking at the batting cage next to me, and this woman is smashing baseballs. I'm like, who the hell is this? And is Rachel Balkovich, that I believe she's now with Miami. The Yankees had hired her as a hitting coach. I believe she was the first female hitting coach that was hired by Major League Baseball. My point is, you have amazing teachers and instructors at Driveline. How does that help you do your job better?
Honestly, it's the best thing that I could ask for. Not only are they just like great at their craft, right? Like they're excellent coaches at hitting or pitching or strength and conditioning. They are very receptive to the feedback. And I think that's really the key there, is like nobody here has an ego about their thing. Like we understand that every athlete is going to have a touch point with all of the sectors of PT, of strength, of hitting, of whatever they're doing. And that we all have a piece of the puzzle there that needs to be considered, especially on the rehab front. If an athlete's starting to get a little beat up, they're the first people to hey, go see Dylan. Like, you don't need to be doing this right now if you're over here in pain or whatever. Like, go see Dylan, get a plan figured out, modify the training plan for the next couple of weeks, and then we get you back into things. So they're the first ones to jump on that horse and make sure that their athletes are well taken care of. And the unique thing about Driveline is we have athletes all over the country. And so it doesn't matter if they're in person, if they're in Japan, if they're in Florida, wherever it may be, I can easily consult with them, help them out, make sure that they have a plan of action of how to carry things forward and make sure that we get the best out of their training.
Will, I think we won't go too much into this, Dylan, but I think you also brought up is that coordinated care. This is what you guys do such a good job of, and I think we're working on something to kind of even make it better. But what you don't even see is even the next step, right? It's like, so Dylan as a player, he gets hurt. Dylan feels like this is now beyond even what he wants to deal with. And then he reaches out to me or his other baseball surgeons to see the player as well. And so that concierge service that Dylan delivers continues on. And so we're able to do this. I mean, we had a great example, right, Dylan, of a player from Taiwan that he came in, got him organized, got him the surgery. He went back to Taiwan to rehab. It just got an awesome video of him throwing. He's back to baseball fully. But just to be able to do that for your players and to be able to have that sort of leeway. And the nice thing is the players come in, they come informed. They're not coming into me scared. They have no idea what's going on. And I think the feeling's mutual from both parties, but it's been really nice too, that way that I think Driveline sets it up that's like, this is just like professional level everything, right? Like you just do your with your coaches, you do all your stuff. That's great. You get hurt, you see Dylan. Dylan does his thing. And if Dylan thinks it's too much or doesn't want to deal with this because it's now more of a surgical injury, then they get you into a surgeon promptly to get it evaluated. It doesn't mean you're going to get surgery. It just means that you're going to get someone else to take a look at you. And then you get right back over to Dylan and right back into Driveline. So it's just a really nice setup. So you never feel like you're lost. I think that what would you say about that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's as easy as it sounds. Honestly, I send you guys an email, you get them in quickly. It's honestly the biggest blessing that we have. You're our go-to source for all of that. So yeah, it's streamlined. And like you said, the athletes are informed. Like, I don't care how much time, how many days, day after day. I mean, these guys are dealing with a lot of anxiety around injuries when they do pop up. They're in here all the time asking questions, wanting to learn more, wanting to know what their options are, wanting to know what their timeline looks like. So it's really about sitting down, making sure that they know that what their options are, what they're laid out for, that their coaches are involved, and that we have somebody that is like you, who's going to be able to give them that extra look, that deeper dive, and send them back our way so that we have a more informed plan. So it's just super streamlined. It's really great, honestly.
Well, and one nice thing too, I know Will may talk about, you may not this, but like when you're hearing this, you think of this person's with you guys all the time. But I would tell you once every 2 months, especially during the full baseball season in spring, I get one player from you that I'm not planning on doing surgery on. They're here for a couple of months because they're back from college, right? Yeah. And they're playing. And so the point of Driveline is like, it does even have that drop-in opportunity for certain players, or especially to come back for a few months and do your training and know that like you're still getting the same level of care, right? Like You guys send me your regulars. You guys send me your drop. I mean, I've had a couple of players who told me they're leaving in 2 weeks. You need to get them figured out. They're flying home, and I'm like, I got you. So it's just a nice setup, and it's nice that you guys just treat all the players the same. And I feel like anywhere from my 13-year-old you sent me to your really high level college athlete, I don't ever feel like anybody's getting less of care, which is just awesome.
Yeah, we're just trying to make sure that everybody has the same access. Obviously there's some insurance games to play and things like that, but if we can get them immediate care and all of that, we're getting them to you, and then we're getting a plan of action out of that. And even if they're gone, it's you are leaving the most informed that you could be. And whether I'm taking care of it, you're taking care of it, or somebody where they live is taking care of it, I want you to have a full understanding of what's going on and how we're going to get past it.
100%. So, Will, last thing, could we ask him? I want to ask you can be as brief as possible because I know we're running out of time. But
I got to ask him the most important question. So hurry up, wrap it up, because I got the most important question of the interview right now.
Dylan, where again, as brief as you can, where is the future for you guys at Driveline? Obviously, it's expansion, but where is the future? What's the next step for you?
Next step for us is just going to be continuing to do the things that we already do really well. We're really diving into more of the health side, honestly, the FlexPro product that I was talking about. We're integrating that fully into our entire assessment process. We're getting EMG sensors involved. We're starting to understand how your mechanics interact with all of that. And pitching is kind of taking this shift from how do we throw really hard to how do we command better? How do we keep you healthier? Because injury risks are on the rise. So we want to make sure that we're covering it on all basis. And I think that's really where we're headed. And then with our athletes, we have the pulse sensor. That's our workload monitor. We've built out these amazing smart reports that you get a report on how well you've done every single day. And we're learning day after day how to better leverage that technology to keep you healthier throughout the entire year.
Awesome. Will, go for it.
All right. We're going to wrap it up right here. This is the most important conversation that we're going to have all night. All right. So let's get right to it. Okay. This is what the baseball world is talking about for some reason or other. And it's the torpedo. All right.
Yeah.
What is the internal conversation that's happening at Driveline about the torpedo barrel and how it's affecting baseball, and maybe even it's affecting the hitters?
Yeah. I mean, we love it. We love the innovation. We think it's cool. We think it's exciting. One of our employees put out a nice little analysis from the data science perspective that we're not necessarily seeing it, max out. Any exit velos aren't going any higher, but the quality of the contacts, the average velo that you maybe see per hit, that kind of stuff is changing. So maybe it changes the middle ground, but it's not necessarily that much of a game changer to where we need to freak out and ban it as right away, because now we're adding 10 miles an hour of exit velo and everything's a home run. It's just kind of changing the middle ground from what I understand. But there are definitely people at Driveline that could answer this question way better than I could. I'm just a novice when it comes to that, but I think that's my current understanding so far.
I love
well, you did
it.
better than I was going to do, so that was good.
I love it. It's just for fun, and it's just the way the game is. And more than anything else, we didn't even get into the mental aspect, right? We didn't even get into all that. But even if your opponent is worried that the batter's holding a torpedo bat, or the hitter is feeling extra confident, because we know in all
placebo
sports,
effect.
You're just feeling great about yourself.
Yeah,
I'm rocking it. I mean, it's all good. And for everyone that may be up in arms, the game always changes, whether it's the cleats, the mound, the size of the outfielder's glove that looks like it's 3 feet long. It happens in sports. Let's embrace it. Let's love the game. And more importantly, we're talking about baseball instead of football, basketball, and all these other sports. Baseball is front and center. And if you're a baseball fan, that's what we all want.
Yeah.
Dylan, thank you so much for your time. We're all going to say goodbye together due to our time on rambling, which is Dr. Garcia's fault. Dr. Garcia, I told you not to talk too much. Say goodbye to Dylan, Dr. Garcia.
Bye,
Dylan.
All right,
thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.